Okay, today we're going to talk about quoting textual evidence. A reminder that when I say quoting textual evidence, I don't mean that you are putting quotes from the book as in dialogue in your essay. It can be dialogue, but it can also be just the narration, the descriptive language. Quoting just means anything that is not your words, it's somebody else's words. So anything that Sue Monk Kidd writes is quoting textual evidence. Okay, so we're using a strategy called I.C.E. I-C-E. It stands for introduce the quote, cite the quote, and explain. So introduce the quote. That is the first step of I.C.E. You need to state who is talking and to whom, if it's relevant, when, where, and what is being talked about. So if you don't do that, you do something called a floating quote, and then it doesn't make sense. If you were just to put in there, look out for the train as like a standing sentence, we're like, okay, but who said that? Who are they saying it to? What's happening in the book? We don't really understand. You have to introduce it in the same sentence. So for example, you could use in chapter 12, Lily says, look out for the train. Or when Lily first meets August, she tells her to look out for the train. After May's death, the sisters decide to look out for the train. Okay, make sense? C stands for cite. This is really important. This is MLA citation format for parenthetical citations. Parenthetical means a quote that you put in parentheses. So you need to type the quote exactly like it is in the book and use proper punctuation. Even if you're like, I don't agree with that punctuation, it's what the author wrote. You're going to put it in there anyway. Put the last name of the author and page number in parentheses after you close the quotation. So the little bunny ears, right, on the quotes, you call it opening a quote when you put the quotation marks, the bunny ears, and then you say the sentence, and then you close the quote with more quotation marks, okay? Do not use the words page or PG or number symbol, okay? It's a lot simpler than that. So it should look like this. Open quote, sentence of the quote, close quote, and then in parentheses, kid, because that's her last name, 13, close parentheses, period. Period always goes after parentheses. Here's another version of it with a series of pages. Say the quote goes from one page to another. You'll write kid, 340 to 341, close parentheses, period. Again, no commas, no periods in the middle, no numbers. An important thing to know is that you only need to include the author's name in the first quote. After that, you can just do the page number. Since we're using the same author every time, we only need to say her once, Sue Monk Kidd, in the very beginning, and then we say kid in the first quote we have, and then say this second bullet is our second quote. You don't even need the kid part because we've already said it, and we're only working with one author. All right, still continuing with citing a quote, you can use ellipses. If you don't know what an ellipses or an ellipsis is, it is the dot, dot, dot. You can use dot, 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 or ellipses, when you leave out a part of a quote, or if you start or finish a quote part of the way through. So you could say there's a lot more to this quote before Lily Melissa Owens, but you don't need that beginning part. You could just say, she says, and then open quotations, dot, 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 Lily Melissa Owens, your jar is open, close quotations, parentheses, page number, parentheses, period. This dot, dot, dot lets the reader of the essay know, okay, there was more. It's not relevant to what you're trying to say, but I'm understanding that you're leaving something out. You can also do it at the end, like in the second example. One example I didn't put in here is you can put it in the middle. So say you wanted to cut out 2 or 3 sentences in a really long paragraph. You could say, I was speculating how one day, years from now, and then maybe dot, 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 da, 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 and you pick up back at the end an envelope to cover it. Dot, 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 okay? If you're confused on that, let me know. I'm happy to walk you through it again. When you're citing short quotations, short quotation is defined as 4 or fewer typed lines. So if you're typing it on your Google Doc and it goes over 4 lines, it's a long quotation. If it's under 4 lines, it's a short quotation. You need a punctuation mark like period, comma, semicolon before the close parentheses. Sorry, after the close parentheses. I knew that didn't sound right. So I've already talked about this before, but you need a you put the punctuation, ending punctuation after the parenthetical citation, not within the quote. I know it's weird. The exception is a question mark and an exclamation point go inside the quote. Those are the only weird ones, but then you still need an ending punctuation so we know the sentence is over. Still in short quotations, if you state a page number in your intro, you don't need it in the parentheses. So if you wanted to avoid parenthetical citation because it's blowing your mind and you don't want to deal with it, you can always go at the end of chapter 1 on page 33. Lily reflects on how the small sound of the door closing could fall across the world. Okay? So you put the page number in there, you said who's saying it, you introduced it, you cited it correctly because you already stated the page number, then it'd be fine. Long quotations are called block quotes. That's more than 4 typed lines, so it's 5 or more. These are when you think like a really long monologue that somebody has or a big chunk of description is super important. You need that whole thing in order to support your claim. That's called a block quote. And those are formatted very differently. So after the quote intro, after the ICE, where you say, Zach says, you use a colon and not a comma. You use a colon and then you skip a line and you indent it like a new paragraph and you just copy the text straight from the book and you put the page number at the end in parentheses. You do not use quotation marks. So for example, in chapter 4, Bronte describes how the family hid this particular keepsake, colon, and we skipped a line and we indented it, so it's like a new paragraph. And this whole thing is a quote from the book, and at the end, we put a parentheses with the page number after the punctuation. I know, these rules are annoying. I did not make them up to torture you, I promise. This is just the formatting that we gotta work with. Here's my pro tip. Block quotes are the worst. So only use them if every single word and line that you are citing is necessary. More often than not, you can use an ellipses to cut out unnecessary lines altogether. Okay? Block quotes, nobody really likes to read them. And you'd be hard pressed to find a block quote from this book that is absolutely necessary and dependent on every single word. I bet you could trim it down. Okay? So maybe just avoid them altogether. If you absolutely need them and you're confused, let me know. All right, E. Now we're finally on to the E of ICE. E means explain, okay? This is where you use at least 3 Y sentences, yellow sentences, to explain how this quote relates to and supports your G sentence of whatever paragraph you're on, your green sentence, okay? This is super important. It's not negotiable. 1 Y sentence is not going to be enough. A good rule of thumb is to do 3 per quote. So every quote you have, you need 3 sentences of explanation. If you do a second quote, you need 3 more sentences of explanation. So just a little review. ICE stands for introduce the quote, cite the quote, and explain.